The arms race for continued conference viability continues to heat up with the ACC's new TV ratings landscape. But is the art of appeasement a good thing? And do the Big 12 need to do something to counter this?
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first entire year. Speaking of money, the ACC seems to have a creative way to try to garner the respect of Florida State, Miami, Clemson, so on and so forth. But in my opinion, the art of appeasement typically doesn't work out. But what do I know? I'm a newbie in the industry. So let's bring on somebody who I kind of consider an expert with 19 years in ESPN before almost 15 years of running your own empire very successfully, I might add. Mark Rogers, thank you for joining the program today. How are we feeling, brother man?
Cody, good to see you, man. I know that anytime I need an energy boost on my show, I call on you. So I appreciate you calling on me this time.
Well, you know what? It's actually very refreshing that I have the ability to give you a holler because let's break this thing down here. I was doing research over time, and I was trying to find a legitimate way why this makes sense, why this is good for the ACC, especially when we're talking about potential future conference realignment. But I keep reverting back to the Big 12 always made concessions for Texas and OU, so much so that it caused A&M, Nebraska, Colorado, and everybody else to leave the conference at one point in time. Now, the new age Big 12 seems to be doing somewhat well, but is this a good thing for the ACC, and how do they think this is going to end up being beneficial in the long run? What am I missing, Mark? Help me out here, buddy.
Well, Cody, the first thing that comes to mind in making those comparisons between how the Big 12 treated and elevated OU and Texas versus the rest of the conference versus what's going on with the ACC is the ACC has Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College. We could go down the line. Where are those schools going to go? They don't have any other options. Of course, we had a Pac-12 10 years ago, and between the Pac-12 and the Big 12, we could have argued all day and night which was the better conference or the better landing spot for a lot of these programs. And Colorado showed us that at different times in history, they determined, well, the Pac-12 is better. No, the Big 12 is better. No. So I think we got a different situation. You know, where is Wake Forest going to go? The ACC has 3/4 of its schools locked down. They're not going anywhere. They only have a group of 5 option. You know, we could see the ACC implode in the next 6 years when this contract runs out, and we could see the Wake Forest of the world playing in the American Conference. So I think it's actually a good move. Now, is it a good enough move to keep the conference together and viable in the future? I highly doubt that, but I think they've done what they really need to do and say Florida State, Clemson, Miami on down the line, North Carolina, they're pretty much the 4 that bring in anything substantial above the average TV audience for the ACC. And so we've got to do something to appease them and show that we're making a good faith effort to respond to, this is unprecedented. We've got 2 schools who took the ACC to court. I don't think I was alone in thinking this is the end of it, because who takes a conference to court and says all the horrible things that Florida State and Clemson said about the ACC and was countersued on the other hand? So we had 4 suits going on at the same time in 3 different states and survives that. But they did come to an agreement. The agreement seems to be very short-sighted and very much just survival mode in the immediacy, and it's not necessarily going to last for too long.
Well, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. This is clearly shifting towards the ones who carry the most ratings, which is going to be Florida State, Clemson, and Miami primarily. And, of course, North Carolina is going to be in that mix, especially now with Bill Belichick. But we'll hold some of that Bill Belichick conversation for segment 2. Nonetheless, it does feel like you're alienating at least half of the conference by doing this, which is when you're thinking about future viability and the potential of another round of conference realignment. Why would you risk pissing off the Virginia Techs and the Louisvilles of the world? Now, of course, you're going to talk about the Wake Forests as well, and I think we all agree that they're going to end up elsewhere. But I just don't see how this prolongs the ACC as a conference for longer than a few years, because eventually this is going to run its course, especially if they add in divisions, wherever you're having the TV rating teams in one half of the division and the other part of the division isn't really going to do much. It just, I'm having a hard time making it make sense. But you just mentioned you think it's actually probably a good idea. Help me with that a little bit.
Well, Cody, I think you hit on the perfect layer of teams when you threw out Louisville, Virginia Tech. We could throw NC State into that place. I am the most intrigued by those schools because I know that Florida State's going to have a landing spot, even if the ACC implodes, and Clemson's going to finish in the SEC or somewhere. Right. They're going to be fine. They are of a brand level that they are going to have a landing spot, even if it's the Big 12, even if they don't want to land in the Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10, and the Big 10 specifically has shown indications of not necessarily wanting those schools, that if they land in the Big 12, that's still better than, the wilderness. So
unless you're a Utah fan, I don't want more Utah fans moaning about the conference all the time, but I digress.
You would have that, definitely. You would have like that times 10 with Clemson and Florida State fans. But man, when I brought up to our Miami host on our Miami show that you may have to, go to the Big 12 at some point, boy, yeah, you would have thought that we were banishing them to hell because they just thought, oh, well, we're too good for that. We got to be in the SEC or the Big 10. Well, that may not be realistic, but the point I was going off of the couple schools that you mentioned, and again, I'll throw a couple more in there, that I think there's this middle tier of the ACC that you don't want to piss them off, because the Big 12, I think, would love to have the likes of Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State.
I think Pitt would be good for West Virginia.
Oh, absolutely. It would be. And, we've already expanded to the point, UCF, Cincinnati, and West Virginia more than 10 years ago, that the geography almost doesn't matter at this point. Right. But that level of school fits right in with the Big 12, those fringe top 25 type programs. So I don't think the ACC wants to, I think they want to not piss them off. They've got Syracuse and Wake Forest, et cetera. They've got them by the jugular, they've got them around the neck. They're not going anywhere. They're just happy to still be in a power conference. But that middle tier, it's going to be intriguing to see where they land. And, I did an ACC breakdown on TV ratings, and I correlated the ACC TV ratings over the last 2 years to the money that's being proposed, which is a 60-40 split, as you well know, where 40% is divided evenly, 60% is based on TV ratings. Yeah. And I ran it by a couple people that I trust in the industry, and they said, oh, you hit these numbers pretty close. And it does really widen out what was before obviously an equal split, and really skews it toward Florida State, Clemson, and on down the line. But the Virginia Techs and Louisvilles of the world, in that scenario, they actually bump up a couple million, so they might be appeased enough to be okay.
It's a risky move, but when we're talking about potential earth-shattering moves, Brett Yormark has mentioned some things like, going with the naming rights, right, being the Dr. Pepper, All-State, Big 12, something to that effect, as well as the private equity. And as much shade was thrown Brett Yormark's way, you've heard some of the other conferences like the Big 10 and the SEC kind of start to discuss the potential opportunities of doing that third-party equity. Why, in your opinion, has Brett Yormark in the Big 12 talked about some things, but we haven't necessarily made moves, when clearly the ACC is trying to do something? I think by viewership numbers alone, they were a little over 41 million below the Big 12 this previous season. So I understand they need to do something, but doesn't the Big 12 of Brett Yormark need to look at this and have a counter to it? Even if it is the naming rights or the third party, what is stopping Brett Yormark in the Big 12 from doing one of these groundbreaking style of moves, in your opinion?
Well, we know that he just received a 3-year contract extension in the last couple of days, and I applaud that. Big 12, I applaud that, because I think he's been an excellent commissioner. I think he's explored everything that's reasonable and maybe even beyond reasonable.
Yeah.
With a very entertainment mind and a creative mind, knowing, hey, we start off behind the SEC and the Big Ten in a big way, and we've got to do some things to make up some ground and stay relevant. So I applaud everything he's done. He's made some comments here and there that I understand he needs to promote his league, but I thought that they were a bit ridiculous. But I knew that he had to play salesman and report things to be just fine in their equity with the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, when it comes to this, what's really funny about the landscape of the Big 12 is at any point, just like the league standings, you can flip them and mix them up all over the place, and it's believable. If you said 2025 and you took and just drew names out of a hat and said they're going to finish in this order, nobody could argue with you. And that's a great thing for this league. For the true football fan like you and I, Cody, we love that. Yeah. I love that Oklahoma State, can go from Big 12 championship game to 0-9 in the conference. And then they might reverse it this year based on what Mike Gundy's proven in the past. But there's a factor here that doesn't exist in the ACC. So the ACC's top heavy, Florida State, Clemson, and then Miami, etc.
Right.
Where the Big 12, Oklahoma State's a stronger brand traditionally under, the last 20 years. Kansas State's a stronger brand, but it's so even, unlike the other conferences, that I don't know what a revenue distribution model like the ACC would do in the Big 12, except for we have a very unique component currently in the Big 12 that has never existed before, and his name is Deion Sanders. And he coached the 10 most popular games in the Big 12 last season, and it's not even close. So Colorado would love this revenue distribution as long as they can hang on to a guy that's completely separate from any other entity or brand in the country, and that's Deion Sanders.
Well, Mark, it's almost like you've done this 133,000 times. That is a phenomenal segue. We're going to talk about some of the Big 12 coaches and just in general the differentiation between the Deions and the Gundys of the world and how that could potentially look in the future. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, we do have to remind the fine folks out here that you need to be paying attention to everything in life, of course, but you also need to be paying attention to what is best on the go for you and your family. The gaming world continues to kind of grab everybody's amazement, whether it be youth or the older generations. Amazon Fire Stick TV 4K is not just for your TV, it's also an Xbox. So you can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire Stick 4K devices. There's no console required. Just grab a paired controller, subscribe, or sign into your Xbox Game Pass Unlimited with EA Play, including you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, EA Sports, College Football, Call of Duty. The possibilities are endless, and it's easy for you to stream your favorite shows as well. How do you game when you're not in front of your main setup? Well, at hotels or family gatherings or even just in another bedroom with Fire Stick 4K TV, it's going to make it possible for you to keep playing from literally almost anywhere. Do you ever find yourself flipping between apps and find one place that just works better than the others? With Fire Stick 4K TV, everything's all in one place, from Netflix to YouTube to Xbox and beyond. Head on over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controllers are required. Available on select devices, including Fire Stick 4K 2nd Gen, 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Get squared away today with the best in the business for your entertainment and gaming purposes with Amazon Fire TV 4K today. All right, so we roll back into this, and you mentioned Deion Sanders, and I was one of those individuals this previous season that thought, getting 45, 50 transfers over and over was not likely the right recipe for success. I was built on the Mike Gundy, get the 2 stars, get the 3 stars, right? Build them up over the years, just like Kansas State and Iowa State have always done. That was the model that I thought was going to equal the most amount of success. And then we return 20 starters and 90% of the roster and have an absolute disastrous season. So clearly there could be a mixture between the Deion model and the Mike Gundy model, and now you have Bill Belichick entering this equation. In your opinion, do you think the old school coaches still have an understanding in this new landscape? Or do you think this season is going to be a very good litmus test for whether that's applicable or not?
So I started to line this up, Cody, in the previous segment that
Okay,
Deion is unlike anything else we've ever seen in college football.
fair.
Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, anybody that you would have mentioned as a great all-time head coach became that because of their coaching prowess. Deion was a brand before he entered college football. He doesn't need college football to be a brand. He is completely separate from anyone else. What he can get away with, I don't know that anybody else can get away with. He's even stated and proven, I'm not going recruiting. I'm not traveling. People are going to have to come see me. Transfer portal players, recruits, they're going to have to come see me. Otherwise, my assistant coaches are out there doing some recruiting. But I don't know that that model can exist to that extreme anywhere else. I don't know that it's viable anywhere else.
Gotcha.
And in addition to that, you just basically put Whittingham and Gundy in there. I just don't know that they can change that much. So they should draw from the Dabo Swinney model, which is the exact opposite. And say what you will about Dabo Swinney, and I know his detractors all over the place for
I
the way
love
he
him.
acts and the things he says and
I
his
love
faith
him.
and
Yeah.
various things. But this guy, once the transfer portal started humming, as you well know, Cody, he was getting all sorts of criticism for, oh, he can't keep up. He's outdated.
Yep.
It's not going to work for him. He can't pull this off. But the other thing that's not being reported much is that he doesn't lose any players. So if anybody's built a culture in
Very
college
true.
football, it's Dabo Swinney. He's not going after players, but he's also not losing players. He recruits at a level that is obviously way beyond what Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and others are doing. He's bringing in top 10 classes in the nation. But I think you can draw from both. You have to be active in the transfer portal, I guess, unless you're Dabo Swinney. You have to be active in the transfer portal. But to do it to the extent of Deion, I think that Whittingham, Gundy need to stay with what they do, but use the transfer portal like NFL free agency. You know, fill a need, fill a hole, go get a really good player here or there that might make a difference. But otherwise, you got to lean on the high school recruiting, and you're recruiting players at Oklahoma State and Kansas State that are 3 stars that should understand the value of school and wanting to have a relationship with the coaching staff and understand the off the field values that are brought by places like Oklahoma State.
Yeah, well, and you know, I have to give credit where credit is due, and Mike Gundy has done a very dramatic shift. He's prided himself over the years on having coached. We've talked about this on your program. One of the reasons I thought Oklahoma State was going to, win a Big 12 title this previous season was because we have so many coaches that have been there for 14 years, 17 years, 19 years, and most of the roster had been there for the majority of their college careers, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. The coaching complacency, you could factor in a lot of things, but we fired literally everybody on the staff, not named Sean McGuire or Sean Snyder, and he had only been there a year, so I guess that does make sense. And we've brought in almost 40 transfer individuals. So Mike Gundy is going with the Deion model, but even though some people have some reservations, Deion's not the only one. I remember Mel Tucker did it with Michigan State, had 50 new players that had not been familiar, had a phenomenal season. And if it weren't for some extracurricular activities, we don't know what Michigan State would have turned into with Mel Tucker at the helm doing that in the transfer portal market. So this is going to be a very good test for Mike Gundy and what this team looks like, because it is entirely new. Position battles are still happening. Acquisitions in the portal are still happening. And if you notice, our recruiting is in the top 20, which we haven't really been in that conversation very often. So it seems as though that Mike Gundy's doing some things at Oklahoma State that are grabbing some intrigue. But do you agree with the prospect that it doesn't matter if you have another 3-win season? I don't think that's going to happen. But if Oklahoma State has this top 20 recruiting class and a top 30 transfer class and we go 3-9 again, isn't it becoming almost impossible for teams like that to stay in that potential top 50? Maybe there's going to be 2 divisions conversation with back-to-back bad seasons, or do you think that's slightly irrelevant?
Well, I hope it's not taken to that extreme that we're hanging on one season and saying, boy, we're going to eliminate you because you went 3-9. Nebraska went 3-9 a couple of years ago. Shoot, Oklahoma State's proven itself under Mike Gundy that it's going to be a viable fringe top 25 program, and sometimes even better than that, that I would hope that extreme we would not get to that extreme. But I think they also need to factor in, if we're going to eventually land in this major 2-conference split, and that's all that major college football is going to be, I think Oklahoma State's going to be factored in and helped by its TV ratings and its attendance, drawing much more than, we talked about the ACC in a previous segment. Shoot, Oklahoma State blows away all but about 3 schools in the ACC when it comes to attendance.
Yeah.
So I think that those factors, Cody, money always talks. Forget you went 3-9, you packed the stadium, you're Nebraska, you're good, you're fine. People watch you on TV. Okay, you're good. We'll keep you around.
Well, obviously, Mike Gundy did have that kind of Dabo Swinney reluctancy to participate, but you've heard Mike Gundy mention it several times that we're getting guys in, but it's primarily because of NIL. We're spending money to an unprecedented level at Oklahoma State. I mean, we thought giving Ollie Gordon the entire O-line and a few defensive guys some NIL money was a big deal. What we're doing in the transfer portal, I think, is indicative by the guys that we're getting, right? You're getting guys from Ohio State and Purdue and UCLA and Oregon, and that typically wasn't something that we were able to do in the past. So I'm very excited about what we are doing. And I think in closing, what you're saying is the old men in the game, the Mike Gundys, the Kyle Whittinghams, the Bill Belichicks, they can continue to show that they've got a lot of meat and taters left to them if they find ways to adapt. And I think Mike Gundy is definitely doing that. I haven't seen exactly what Utah's doing in the transfer portal, so it'll be interesting. Obviously, Bill Belichick has no choice but to kind of rebuild this thing. But let me hit you with some rapid fire style of questions in the third segment, and we'll talk a little bit about your outlook on the Big 12 this year and how Oklahoma State factors into that, right? But before we do that, I do have to remind the fine people out here yet once again, if I can figure this out. There we go. I did it, Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, you already know what it is. It's the time for you to pay attention to your money. When your change acts a little strange and your money acts a little funny, you need to be able to monitor it much better. Monarch Money is your one-stop shop for everything you need, because we've all checked our bank account and wondered where all the money went. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is very easy for us to lose track of where the dollar bills are disappearing to. Now Monarch Money can come in to be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just your typical budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So just stop simply managing money and start building your wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check all of your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever when your partner is Monarch. You can track your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without stress. Take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for 50% off your entire first year. Get with Monarch Money today to secure your best future. All right, buddy, we're going to swing in here for the home stretch, and I do have some rapid-fire questions for you. But before we get to the rapid-fire stuff, I do want to ask you, what is your outlook on the Big 12 this year? Is the bipolar Big 12 going to strike once again, or do you feel like perhaps a BYU or a Kansas State can kind of take a stranglehold on the conference, or is it going to be another situation where the 16th team ends up number one? What are you thinking, Mark?
Got a stat for you, Cody.
All right.
Years and years ago, I determined that these preseason publications were way, for as good as they are, and we know what they are, that they're way too conservative in their predictions. So I started to chart how many teams from season to season increase or decrease at least 3 wins. I figured that was a pretty substantial number to go from 6-6 to 9-3 or 3-9. Out of the 70 in the Power 5, it's usually about 20 to 22 teams. It was 29 out of 70 last year.
Okay.
And then the Big 12 is obviously, they are the poster child for this. I believe it was 10 of the 16 in the Big 12 had an increase or a decrease, as you painfully found out at Oklahoma State, of course, from the previous season. So who knows what's going to happen? I do think that Kansas State's probably, they just seem to be the surest. Oklahoma State used to be the surest thing, but now we got to knock them back a rung. Kansas State seems to be the surest thing, and I love Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards back with that offense. So Kansas State, I really like, and Iowa State obviously on an upswing with Rocco Beck back at quarterback, and Matt Campbell might be the best coach in the conference. I guess I'll get us started with those 2 looks.
That is very fair. But you mentioned it, right? There's always the option of a team at the bottom of the Big 12 creeping up and having a massive year. And when you're in Oklahoma State's position, you're bringing almost 40 new guys. You don't really know what the team's going to look like. So do you think that Oklahoma State has a rebound year, a medal year, or do you think we kind of slide back down again?
Well, I've not looked at the schedule, at least not recently, for Oklahoma State. I know there's a trip to Oregon, but that, of course, does not factor into the conference race. But who thought Arizona State was going to go from 3-9 to not just winning the Big 12 and repping the Big 12 in the playoff, but actually performing? I think that they outplayed Texas and probably should have won the game. So that astounded me, astounded a lot of people, and that was a good look for the Big 12, for anyone who wanted to take notice of actually how the game was played on the field and not just, oh, the Big 12 lost. Yeah, we didn't think they were going to do anything. So good for Arizona State, and hopefully the Big 12 can keep that up and have another rep or two. Could they possibly get two? Wouldn't that be a shocker? Get two into the playoff to do anything. I just think that starting with Oklahoma State, I cannot envision them making that Arizona State leap, but I would also be surprised if they didn't win 6 games and get to a bowl game.
Yeah, well, if the schedule is much more reminiscent of 2023 as opposed to 2024. And you remember one of the first times I came on your show, I said that I think we win 10 games primarily because of the schedule, and it did end up working out that way. Now, let me hit you with some rapid fire stuff. With the strength of the Florida States, Miami, Clemsons of the world, do you think that the Big 12 once again surpasses the ACC in TV ratings? And if so, do you think it's going to be another 40 million plus, or do you think it's going to kind of shift back down to a more even number?
Well, I think the Deion factor is decreasing, although it's still held pretty strong in year 2. But there was a guy called Travis Hunter, and of course his quarterback and Shadur Sanders. So they may not be in the Big 12 race all the way through to the end, which obviously helped TV ratings there. I know pretty much everybody's schedule off the top of my head, but without going through who the Big 12 is playing outside the conference, obviously this Oklahoma State-Oregon matchup should help the TV viewership there. Of course, the ACC has the benefit of all these Notre Dame matchups, and there's going to be more in the future. We know that. Yeah. But you're telling me there was a 40 million. Give me that figure again. 40 million. What was that?
There was the differentiation between the ACC and the Big 12 was almost 41 million in viewership discrepancy.
That is pretty amazing right there. Now, of course, Colorado can be thanked there, but still, I think of the ACC as being a pretty top-heavy conference where, Clemson, Florida State in particular, would get better ratings across the board than anything in the Big 12, aside from the Deion factor. I would just be spitting into the wind to try to make a guess on that without seeing the schedules and really dissecting it. But I would think that it's going to be difficult for the Big 12 to maintain that type of a pace over the ACC this year.
Well, another decent segue. Do you think the Big 12 has somebody in the coffers that could help reload as back-to-back Heisman winners? That would be great for this conference. Obviously, Travis Hunter is no longer in this equation, but you mentioned Avery Johnson. You mentioned Edwards. I think when you look at Baron Morton, if he's healthy, he can do some absolutely incredible things. I think defensively, there's going to be some guys in this conference that do pop up and cause some havoc. But do you think that the Big 12 has it in them to get another Heisman? And I have a caveat to that after your answer.
I think the Big 12 has it in them. Do the Heisman voters have enough unbiased attitudes to not automatically skew toward the Big 10 and the SEC? Travis Hunter is just a difference maker, and he's just a different sort of athlete. And obviously we have nobody out there that's going to be on the field this year that's going to play at that level on two sides of the ball. That's just crazy. So he's an anomaly. So to be able to break into it, I've always thought 3 things lead to Heisman wins. Number 1, winning team, winning big games for that particular player. Number 2, statistics. You got to have, Barry Sanders in 1988. Look up his stats. They're just unbelievable, off the charts. And number 3 is you have to have highlight reel plays in big moments that people remember. Oh, he made that catch, or that quarterback did a 90-yard drive in the final 90 seconds to pull out that game against Kansas State.
Right.
You need those factors to weigh into it. But I will say that the Big 12 is in a bit of a hole when it comes to trying to overcome the bias that's going to be out there for Big 10 and SEC players.
See, ironically enough, you stole my caveat, because the second part of that was ... or does it matter, because the Heisman's turned into more of a popularity contest than who is the best player in college football. And my example was Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders still owns 33 NCAA rushing records and offensive records, but that would have been Ashton Jeanty this previous season. Am I happy that Travis Hunter and the Big 12 won it? Absolutely. But do I think that Ashton Jeanty in a pure voting landscape would typically win that, or at least in the past would have? Yeah, I do. I do think that Ashton Jeanty doing what he did at Boise State would have mattered back in the day, because in 1988, Oklahoma State was a Boise State, right? And I don't even think you could say we were that. But because of the statistics that he put up, he was the best player in college football, so he won the award. I'm not saying that Travis Hunter wasn't the best player in college football. Having the ability to go both ways probably is what secured it. But from a statistical perspective, Ashton Jeanty was doing things that haven't been done since almost Barry Sanders' days. Yet he didn't win it. So is the Heisman losing a little bit of its appeal nationally? And
I also think you're leading us to this, Cody. What Travis Hunter was able to do and the exposure that he received, it's going to be very rare, if not unfathomable, for another Big 12, maybe any player in the nation, but a Big 12 player to gain that kind of attention that he automatically got because of the Deion factor, because Colorado draws crowds, and then it just spins into social media. And because of all those factors involved in his connection to Colorado and to Deion and the TV ratings, I don't know that another Big 12 player is not going to be playing in front of audiences of 6 to 10 million viewers. They're going to be more into that. The best Big 12 games are more in that 3 to 4 million range. And that only happens a handful of times a year.
And lastly, I'll fire one off for you before I let you skedaddle on off of here. Whenever it comes to the Big 12 and the ACC at the end of the season, aside from the TV viewership, right? Do you think that the next step in which conference is better is somebody winning the CFP or winning a CFP game, right? Whether it be the ACC or the Big 12 in this upcoming season, because you'd mentioned it in the second half, Arizona State definitely outplayed Texas. And nobody thought that was possible coming into the game. Athletically, I honestly didn't see Arizona State playing that well, but they were this close to having an extra notch in the Big 12, but it did not happen. And now this TV viewership is being brought up. Do you think that the CFP win will be what matters? Or do you think at the end of the season, there will be a viewership discrepancy that's talked about in the offseason once again?
The Big 12 is in a tough spot because while I love the Big 12, I love the brand, I love the unpredictability of it.
You're going to hit me with a but, aren't you?
Most people only care about who are your best teams. And are those best teams able to win a national championship? And for as much as the Big 12, and I ranked after this past season, the Big 12 to be a better conference than the ACC, and I thought the numbers proved it out, and just the evaluation of the two conferences top to bottom proved that out, that the ACC was just atrocious for most of its 1 through 17 status there, that there are a couple programs that have proven that they can, if everything's right, and I'm talking Clemson and Florida State primarily, that if everything's right, they can go win a national championship. And without Oklahoma and Texas, there are no other programs left in the Big 12 that have proven that in forever.
So do you think that the instability, or I don't want to say instability, but the bipolar nature of the Big 12 creating so much chaos, whether it be 16th or first place, it might be the only conference legitimately where number 15 can beat number 2 a multitude of times. Do you think that ultimately is good for the Big 12? Or do you think an Oklahoma State, a Utah, a Kansas State, a Texas Tech, do you think somebody needs to grab that flag and run with it to be the new OU? Do you think that's the better outcome for the future? Or do you think the craziness is good for the viability in the future?
The craziness is good for the hardcore fans. The craziness is embraced by the hardcore fans. Unfortunately, what you depicted at the beginning of your statement is what the Big 12 wants to attain, because Arizona State proved to be the best team in the conference, and nobody knew it until about 3 weeks left in the season. And actually, most college football fans across the nation didn't know it until they were beating Iowa State in the third quarter like a drum in the Big 12 championship game. They were finally awakened to, oh, who is this? We know it's Cam Scatterbo. We've seen him on some highlights. What's going on with the rest of this team? They're that good. They're beating Iowa State, and then, well, they're going to get killed in the playoff. So nobody arrived at this conclusion that Arizona State was this good until basically their season was over and they were taking Texas to the wire. Whereas you go to the Big Ten, you know who to watch the entire season. You go to the SEC, you know who to watch. Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon. You know the entire season who to watch, where in the Big 12, we can take a guess of who to watch. But it may turn out to be 6 weeks into the season that it's a completely different team, and it's going to take weeks for them to grab the attention for people to notice. You know, I had people that are really locked into college football not really notice Arizona State until so late in the season. They were like, did you notice that Arizona State's like 8-2 right now? Yeah, I did. But nobody's watching them right now.
You know, I was big on Cam Scatterbo dating back before the 2023 season, coming over from Sac State. So it was nice to kind of be in on that trend. But I'll admit to you, I didn't see Sam Leavitt coming on and being the way he is. And when you have some viable names in the conference, right, Sam Leavitt's being viewed as a potential top-end prospect. There's other quarterbacks in the Big 12 that are viewed in that same lens. I think it's going to be a test throughout the course of the season. But at the end of the day, I think the Big 12 does need a flagship program, like you had mentioned, because if you're Oregon, you're going to stay in the top 10 as long as you win all season. And that's got to be good for viewership. It's got to be good for marketability. And you're right, the Big 12 hasn't had that recently. That, by and large, was OU. For most of my time growing up, OU was kind of the flagship program of the conference. And Texas Tech, I know I keep saying I'll let you get out of here, but don't you think that it's kind of important for them to be successful? If you're spending the amount of money they are in NIL and you're getting the big name transfers that you're getting, is Joey McGuire going to lose some luster if they have a 7-5 season with all of this money and all of this talent coming in? Do they become the Texas A&M of the Big 12 if they don't win this year?
Well, it's not a good sign for them that they're pouring all these resources into winning and trying to be relevant within the conference and beyond that. But I don't think it hurts the Big 12. There's always going to be, I don't think this is like Ohio State or Alabama going into a 5-year funk that's really going to hurt those conferences. I don't think that anything's dependent on with Texas Tech. I am going to throw out a warning sign, and I hate to throw out another negative toward the Big 12's future. But if you think about it, Colorado, from a popularity standpoint, has been Georgia, Ohio State, fill in the blank over the last 2 seasons. Now, if that continues to, I don't know that it faded much last season. It couldn't stay on the fever pitch that it was for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the previous season. Yeah. But they maintained it pretty well. Now, if that fades, then the Big 12 is truly just because even though Colorado's not been the banner, the flag, flagship school from a winning standpoint, they have been from a popularity standpoint. And once that wanes, then the Big 12 really doesn't have that school.
Well, how dare you be negative to end it? But I appreciate your analysis. You're very fair, and I greatly appreciate your time. Mr. Mark Rogers, let everybody out here know how they can track you down and pay attention to the work that you're doing. By the way, congratulations on what you've been continuing to grow. I see you're continuously hiring people for different teams, different conferences. I love linking up with Clint. Clint's absolutely hilarious, and it's a really fun time. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for growing your empire to a pretty remarkable level and having the ability to dissect multiple conferences almost at a whim. Let the fine folks now out here know how they can track you down and pay attention to your work, brother man.
Well, we're on YouTube, Voice of College Football. I think if you type that into the search engine, you should be able to find us, Voice of College Football. We've got a main channel, and as Cody alludes to, we've got team channels for just about everyone. Also going to push this book. Big 12 fans, you should be interested in this. I did a breakdown of the 1990s Disputed National Champions. You can find it at Amazon. We've received nothing but great feedback and comments about the reviews on this book, Disputed National Champions. It's on Amazon. Give it a look.
All right. I love it. That is a beautiful plug. Mark, thank you for being a consummate professional and being great at your job and continuing to help people like myself understand the landscape that is always evolving and always changing on a pretty continuous basis. Thank you very much for your time, dude. I greatly appreciate it. Feel free to reach out whenever, brother.
Cody, I love what you do for college football. I love your enthusiasm, your knowledge, everything you bring to the table. Great stuff. And that's why I keep having you back on my show. So I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Rogers, he came. He gave us a really good breakdown in multiple areas, and now he's going to go punch life in the throat repeatedly because that's what he does. All righty, brother. Thank you. As for all of you out here, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State, because you could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it. Dislike it if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people out there. You're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fountain, the fondue, the funny stuff, the funky stuff. You're all of it. You know what it is. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.